And we should have everyone, Chair Parker.
Great, thank you. Good evening. I'm calling this public hearing to order at 6 p.m. in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, MGLC 131, Section 40, and the Boston Wetlands Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Chapter 7-1.4. The Boston Conservation Commission will hold a virtual public hearing this evening on June 5th, 2024, to review the following projects to determine what conditions, if any, the commission will impose in order to protect the interests of the public and private water supply, groundwater, prevention of pollution, flood control, prevention of storm damage, protection of fisheries and land containing shellfish, and protection of wildlife habitat. This evening's hearings will be followed by our regular meeting, and in accordance with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Conservation Commission, the public may access this recording or this meeting through telephone and video conferencing. Additionally, the meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video. Members of the public may have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself, or send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov. For the record, I am Michael Parker, Chair of the Commission. Could staff please identify themselves?
Elena Itamari with the Environment Department.
Speedy Hernandez with the Environment Department.
Fantastic, thank you. I'll now call the roll of commissioners who are present. Commissioner Sullivan,
John Sullivan.
Commissioner Long,
Nick Long.
Commissioner Wilson,
Mike Wilson.
Commissioner Conan.
Anand Thiruvengadam.
Thank you, and me. Okay, first item tonight is notice of intent for DEP file number 0061992 and Boston file number 2024-017 from SGH on behalf of Phase 3 Real Estate Partners, Inc. for the proposed demolition of the existing building and construction of a new mixed-use office and lab building located at 7 Channel Center Street in South Boston. Resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
I am.
Also myself, Emmanuel DeAndrade from SGH, and Matt Gilbertson.
Okay. The first person who responded with "I am," could you just let us know your name for the record?
Phil Marcotti from Phase 3 Real Estate Partners.
Great, thank you. Okay, floor is all yours.
All right, so I'll start. Again, like I said, my name is Emmanuel DeAndrade. I'm from SGH, representing the owner on this NOI filing. The project, as stated, it's located at 7 Channel Center Street. And it's basically, the property is bounded by 2 private streets, on one on either side of the building. One side being Channel Center Street, the other side being Medallion Avenue. Could you please move to the next slide, please? So the current conditions consist of an existing abandoned building, which this project will propose to demolish that building and construct a new building for mixed-use office lab space. And you'll see here on the images on the left side, the top views are pictures from the existing current conditions, and the bottoms are renderings. The one to the left is the facade facing Channel Center Street, and the one to the right is the rear of the building, or the portion that's along Medallion Avenue. Next slide, please. So the site, as was mentioned, is located within land subject to coastal storm flowage resource area. I just show the USGS map here to indicate again where the site is located. It is also within a FEMA Zone AE with a base flood elevation of 16.46 feet Boston City base, and also within the Coastal Flood Resiliency Overlay District map with the sea level rise elevation, base flood elevation of 19.5 BCV, which is used for the design of the building. Next slide, please. This is just to illustrate, again, sort of the elevations of the building. The first image to the left, number 1, it's the facade facing Channel Center Street, and includes some balconies. And then the other side is Medallion Avenue, the rear of the building, along, again, Medallion Avenue with where the loading dock is. And next slide, please. so going a little bit through the package and the drawings that were submitted as part of the filing. This here is the site prep, demolition, and erosion and control plan. It's plan C100 that you may have at your disposal there. So I just took a snip because the scaling purposes, the top represents the area near along Channel Center Street, and the bottom, the area along Medallion Avenue. As you can see, the current limits of work are surrounded by silt sock or sediment filter tube, and any catch basins within the vicinity will include silt sacks. So we are, obviously, this is, the design is not finalized. We are in the pursuing with the construction development. Therefore, if there is any changes with the limit of work, with any additional laydown space that may be required as part of the construction management plan, we'll be sure to share that plan with the conservation and also be sure that it will be equally protected with sediment controls. Next slide, please. So this is the grading plan. It's plan number C200. And basically there's not much because majority of the site is a building and then sidewalk in street. These are both private streets, therefore mostly building, but then obviously the intent will be to match the existing grades on the sidewalk. So the north picture there, the top picture, again, is Channel Center Street. And we are basically mimicking the existing conditions. We matching existing and then proposing a new sidewalk. On the south side or Medallion Ave, we are introducing a sidewalk because currently there's no sidewalk, but there is a sidewalk to both left and right of the property. Therefore, we'll just continue the sidewalk and we'll also have an entrance to a loading dock. Next slide. This is the utility plan, the proposed utility plan, Plan C300. As you'll see, most of the utility connections will take place along Channel Center Street. The largest image there to the right side would also show the recharge system within the building. And the bottom along Medallion Avenue, the utilities on that are limited to the electrical service, both permanent and temporary. Next slide, please. This is the last slide that I have, and it's the flood mitigation plan for the project, Plan A100. As you may remember from one of the first slides, we talked about the sea level rise base flood elevation of 19.5. So for following best management practice and obviously meeting the building code and also the Boston Planning Development Agency, the draft coastal flood resiliency design guidelines, we have flood proofing the entire building to an elevation of 20.5 as per the regulations. And any areas of the building with potential environmental hazardous materials such as the pH tanks, pH neutralization tank, and the oil tanks will be dry flood proof to an elevation of 21.5, which is 2 feet above the sea level rise base flood elevation as per the Boston wetland regulations. Sorry, I know that was quick. I was trying to keep it under the 5-minute, but that was basically a quick overview of what the project consists of.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Emmanuel. Couple quick questions for you. Could you let us know where the infrastructure is located? We want to see that elevated above the SLR. Is it BFE or DFE? I think DFE. So could you just let us know more about that?
Infrastructure regarding sort of like transformers, things of that nature. Electrical
Correct.
transformer.
Yep.
Yeah, so the electrical transformers are protected to an elevation of 20.5. So it's the sea level rise base flood elevation plus 1 foot.
Okay. There was something in there about what is below SLR BFE, like water meters, things like that. Am I misreading this?
CLR base flood. So the first floor is at elevation 16.75. However, it will be flood protected by obviously flood shields, flood doors, and flood wall like around the building. Everything is 20.5 minimum. And then the hazards area, like oil tank and the pH tank, is to an elevation 21.5.
Okay. Thank you. And you said private streets on both sides of the building there, the front and the back. So that means the center line on what is the front street? Channel
Center
Street. Yeah, yeah. And I noticed that doesn't seem like with the width of the sidewalk there, any opportunities for any sort of plantings out there, right? Because you have a
Yeah,
impervious
unfortunately,
surface.
no, it's like bare minimum sidewalk width.
Yeah. Yeah. Across the street, there's more room, but that's probably intentional. What about Medallion Street? What does that mean? What do you own back there? Is it the
Similar.
area contiguous with the lot going back to the fence of the USPS facility?
there's-
Or is it center line as well?
Yeah, it's similar, it's center line as well. There's actually sort of, if you look on Google Earth, there's kind of like a painted line on the street. It's sort of a little bit off center, but that's pretty much the limit of the property. So it is all, again, all paved area. It's either street or it's sidewalk. Unfortunately.
So who owns the other side of the center line then? Would it be US
Right.
Postal Service?
Exactly, yes.
Oh, interesting, because there's a fence there. Okay, so I'll let Commissioner Sullivan grill you on stormwater. As far as that back area there, is there any opportunity on Medallion to I don't know, put some impervious surface there, some vegetation? My first thought was the area where the fence is, it would be good to get continuous screening, and that might be an opportunity to green up that area. But from what you're saying, that's owned by USPS.
Yeah,
So
correct.
probably not
Yeah,
going to work.
It is outside. of the limits.
Okay, so anything on your side of Medallion Street that could qualify?
So,
Phil is shaking his head no, so why?
yeah, the only thing we have is a sidewalk that, for accessibility purposes, it'll be
Yeah.
better, in our opinion, to be concrete. But that's the only thing that could be use permeable pavers or something similar to that. However, as you know, they're not as good for accessibility versus a concrete surface. But it will be very limited. It's the width of a sidewalk, which is maybe 3 or 4 feet or so between there. So, but that's the only area that's really, because everything else is paved for the roadway, the street, private street. So there's really
Yep.
just the width of the sidewalk. And like I said, a lot of the accessibility comments we get is like, it's obviously goes against permeable pavers because they tend to move and then become a tripping hazard.
Yeah, understood. And the problem you have with to the center of the street is one, it needs to be accessible, but then you would need approval from abutting property owners for doing anything in the street, even though you own to the center at that particular time. So, or at that particular place. Okay, and you said the sidewalk is only 3 feet in width?
Well, no, it's between 3 to 4. I can't remember. It's whatever it is on the adjacent building, like adjacent the abutters. We're maintaining the same width on the street, entire street.
Okay. And then the roof. Any opportunity for green roof?
Yeah, unfortunately, we looked into that option because we know that we're always trying to introduce green infrastructure, but because of the use of the building being a lab space, it'll be heavily occupied by equipment. So if you take a look on Google, on 5 Channel Center, for example, similar use building, the roof gets basically littered with equipment. So there's very limited space for any green improvements. We did look into it, but it'll be very challenging to say the least, if not impossible, I'd say.
Okay, what about light materials to coat the roof?
Yeah, that I think is not a problem. Yeah, that was definitely, and even the facade, I mean, obviously the facade and the building will use as much as lighter garlics that we can. That's definitely not opposed to that by any means.
Okay, okay. You know what, I'm gonna hold my last question. Let's see what happens.
Sure.
Elena, what do you have on this?
So nothing beyond the questions that you just asked, Chair Parker. I just wanted to clarify for the condition about having, did you say light colors on the roof to better reflect, was that what you had mentioned?
Yes, I did. Yes.
So, okay, great. So, if we could just clarify the wording on that so that we can make sure to add it to the conditions before the hearing is closed, that would be great.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Work on that while we do comments.
Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, are you holding 1 inch or inch and a half on that size building? Or
Inch
rainwater,
and a quarter.
right? You can, yeah, I'm sorry, inch and a quarter. So
Yes,
you are holding inch and a quarter.
yes.
Your comment that you're raising the transformers up to, 1 foot above the flood level. Is that allowed by the Edison, or are these your transformers that you want?
So, yeah, so I might have misspoken. We're not raising it to we're not raising it to 20.5. We're protecting it to 20.5. They cannot be raised greater than a certain amount by Eversource, like whatever they require is what it needs to be.
So you're putting a wall around them.
Exactly. And it will, in the opening side, it will have flood shields to protect it.
Yeah, okay.
20.5.
And the comment, and I see it a lot of times, people say, well, I'm gonna protect my building by putting flood shields. And so I'll have a floor of 16.5, flood shields up, to say the water on outside in the street is 18. If the water's 18, then that means all your sewers and drains are full of water that same size. And unless you have the proper backwater valves on your floor drains, on your toilets, on everything, the water simply goes underground in your pipes and pops up back into your building, takes you out. So you've got to be, it's required by plumbing code, but no one follows it.
And we're certainly including backflow preventers.
Right.
in all the connections. All the connections will be sealed. And the structural slab, it'll be a structural slab to resist buoyancy. So we did consider all those important.
Yeah,
elements.
I'm not worried about the buoyancy and all that. Your building will be there and your floor will probably be okay. It can easily pour backwards because nobody maintains these things. Because when you build them, you put them in a nice inconvenient spot. You pour concrete or you put a transformer wall around it and nobody knows it's there. So I just call that out. You got to be particularly careful on where you put those things and make them accessible for everybody. So
Understood.
it's just like a medieval castle with a moat that has a hole under it. I was watching those good movies the other night, so I know how to do this.
Agreed. Makes sense.
And as far as the sidewalk goes, you can always put permeable concrete, which is as smooth and as everything as regular concrete, yet the water can go through it, but it requires maintenance. So I'm not sure if it's only 3 feet wide. I can't recall with that. That's a private way down there. But that could be done rather than pavers that are all bumpy and stuff. They can pour the concrete that the water can go through. So that is something you could consider.
Yeah, we will consider, obviously the preferred option is regular concrete because like, as you just mentioned, it's very limited area. So it would serve very little purpose. We understand and we would like to sort of show good faith that we're trying to improve the conditions, but it's really limited amount, I would say.
I understand. I'm just pointing it out. That's all I had, Chair Pyer.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Long?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I'm understanding more and more how confined and limited of a site this is. We were asking about trees, green infrastructure, things like that. Reason being that for redevelopment in this area, typically we might look for something beyond just dry flood proofing, which is the storm damage mitigation resource area value in the land subject to coastal storm flowage. So that's why we're all asking about all these other things in addition. But it sounds like, yeah, like we're saying, you're pretty constrained. I wonder, private way issues aside, if there's the possibility of bump outs from the curb for tree planting on Medallion Ave, if that's something you could look into. Maybe, yeah, go ahead.
I can add a little bit. So Medallion Avenue is sort of like the back of the buildings for most of definitely for our building and most of the abutters. So the loading docks are located within that space.
Okay.
They already it's extremely tight already to back in. It's actually impossible in some conditions to back in. They have to park and then unload and bring it into the buildings because there's parking right along that fence that you guys have been speaking about, which is USPS property. So it is, yeah, I think the bump out, it wouldn't really work, I think, because this is the loading area for all these buildings, this Medallion Ave private way.
There's also a bunch of electrical easements and stormwater easements that run through the back area.
Okay, thank you. Chair Parker, you mentioned the sidewalk across the street on Channel Center Street. I think we've had projects in East Boston where we asked for maybe if there's an existing tree pit, even if it's across the street, to maybe plant a tree there. Was that what you were getting at, Chair Parker? Or
I was getting at it, though, and I did not visit the site, but I took a Google Earth walk along it yesterday, and it seemed like there were tree pits at the usual spaces. It didn't look like it looked like that side of the street had been populated to the widths that are allowed. So they're pretty close. At least in the area that I was able to drag my little icon along.
okay. Yeah, I guess that kind of wraps up my questions then. But yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
Yeah, I don't have any further questions beyond that, but I do support Commissioner Long's sort of inquiry as to whether there's something else possible elsewhere, given the very confined site. But yeah, anyways,
Okay,
that's all.
thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. So I'm wondering what that private street, who owns it? Is it USPS?
No, so the Channel Center Street and Medallion Avenue are owned by the owners of the property. So basically, so whatever, for example, 7 Channel Center owns the width of their property to the middle, to the center approximately of Medallion Avenue and to the middle of Channel Center Street. And similarly, 5 Channel owns the same way and so on. So it's multiple owners. They own,
Right.
it's an unusual condition, but that's what it is.
Yeah, it does seem a little unusual, and it actually even cuts like in the middle of the street in some places. It's I'm looking at the BPDA map here and trying to figure out how that works and what kind of easement you all have to give each other in order to get to that part of the street.
Channel Center is open to public travel. Medallion is technically a private way, but the Channel Center Owners Association governs the entire Channel Center Street. And so we work together to create rules around everything. So it works out decently well. And so those tree pits are actually owned by the Channel Center Owners Association, and everybody contributes to that as well as to the Iron Street Park, which is across the street from us. And then as part of the development, there's a $250,000 contribution to the park.
I see. So there's an association to
Correct.
make decisions together about Channel Center Street, but
Correct.
not about Medallion.
As well as Medallion. So we recently,
As well as
Medallion
Medallion.
Ave was repaved as a part of the Channel Center Owners Association budget.
I see. Okay, thanks for explaining that.
No problem.
It's good to know the ownership. So the DFE that we're talking about, the design flood elevation, 20.5 feet, that's calculated with what year in mind?
2070.
2070. And what's the design life of the building being proposed here?
Maybe Matt, if you're on the call, can you please?
The building was designed with a service life of 50 years.
50 years. So I think that, in this age of rapid climate change where the past is no indication of the future, and the calculations and the policy that's codified so far was put down well before 2020. We're in 2024. And if we're hoping that a building like this will live beyond 50 years, we're talking about a year that's beyond what these numbers represent.
Yeah. So the sea level rise BFE is based on the BPDA SLR BFE, which is based on the Woods Hole analysis. When goes back to the MassDOT analysis. So it's ultimately using sea level rise projections from, I think, around 2012. But it's a sophisticated analysis where they're computing, the impact of future storms along with that conjunction of that sea level rise. So although the BPDA identifies it as a 2070 sea level rise, it's really more based on the values that are used in computing those levels. It's based on kind of 2070 to 2100 time range from those SLRs that were available in 2012. There's of course more recent SLR data that we can use regionally from the 2022 NOAA report. And if we go through that analysis, we come up with a similar number when we add kind of a higher bound level of sea level rise. So I think the most recent data is in support of that in conjunction with the freeboard values we're using. But we can develop a narrative around that and provide that.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. If you can share the data or any other form of information that you have to support that 2070 to 2100 kind of claim,
Yep.
I would appreciate seeing that. Thank you. And the flood protection that you talked about, is that like a deployable flood walls kind of flood protection or more permanent?
I can speak to that. I'm working on the flood protection for the building. So where feasible, based on the wall construction, it's permanent, waterproofed, concrete construction designed to resist the future flood loads. Where at locations where we need loading dock doors and pedestrian doors for access, it's either deployable flood shields or passive flood doors. And we do have some interior flood protection walls, again, consisting of waterproof concrete walls with passive flood doors to provide that enhanced protection for the PH room and the fuel oil room.
The deployable flood walls being different from the passive flood shields.
Yeah. So when I say flood shield, deployable flood shield, I'm speaking of planks, sometimes using deployable posts. Not a system that completely wraps the building or it extends the entire facade of the building. These are discrete flood shields deployed to span from door jamb to door jamb, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not a freestanding system that stands out in the side. This is fastened
Right.
to the building base.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I've seen similar mechanisms in the waterfront along East Boston where I live. So thank you. That I appreciate that. And on Chair Parker's question about a green roof, I heard words like challenging being used, and I think we are in a time where we have to be up for those challenges. And if we keep kind of falling back to what is minimal, then I'm not sure that we're actually acting on climate in an adequate way. So even if it is challenging, I would really like to see more of an effort being made to create green roofs with plants and whatnot. That basically is about planning drainage and making sure that the ceiling can hold the soil and the biomass from the plants and trees and whatnot. So given that the amount of engineering that goes into a development like this, I would think that is something that you can consider.
Yeah, we could definitely look into it further. The only I said it would be very difficult. It's only because of the utilities are going to be up there, but we'll certainly entertain. We'll look at it and we'll see how much space there is. And if we can do something, we're obviously willing to do something, I believe, right, Philip?
I'm definitely happy to look into it. The entire border of the building is basically surrounded by a 15-foot acoustic wall. So there's not going to be a lot of good sun on the deck. And then the areas that are inside are kind of filled up with a bunch of air-cooled condensing units, exhaust fans, air handling units. So there's not a lot of physical space for the equipment to land not on a green area. And those green areas wouldn't get a lot of sun, so they wouldn't end up growing. So we would just end up having more of a muddy roof than a green roof. And so I understand the push and I'm happy to look into it. I just don't have a lot of space in this building to make it grow.
I understand the constraints and I understand the issue about shade. There are some shade friendly plants that you can consider. I mean, instead of the question of like whether or not we can do something, it'd be interesting to ask the question, what can we do, right? And the reason I'm sort of pushing this is because with buildings of this size, I mean, I assume you've assessed whether or not you can build on top of the existing building and decided that isn't feasible. Is that correct?
Yep. That's correct.
Okay, so basically what like that's double the carbon, right? We're getting rid of carbon that's already embodied in the existing building, and we're going to be putting in new carbon or emitting new carbon to build a whole new building. And that, all that speaks to mitigation. And the other stuff that we're talking about is adaptations. You know, is the flooding's going to happen? How do we deal with that, right? But the more carbon we keep emitting, the more flood we will be seeing, right? So that's why it's important to constantly keep in mind what we can do to mitigate while we also adapt. Well, I appreciate the consideration. Thank you.
Okay, so a few things came out of the discussion here. Phil, these are going to require your answers. Actually, the first one will not. As far as the deployable flood barrier, we've been asking for a maintenance condition for those systems to make sure that they're checked annually. And I did have a question as to, do you know what other building owners are doing? Or Phil, you brought up the association. Do they have any plans for a unified district type approach?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Okay. The other thing is what Commissioner Sullivan brought up as far as the permeable concrete. And Emmanuel, I appreciate you saying it's a very small area, but there's two things, you know, small areas all over the city add up, number one. Number two is when we get projects like this, we really do try to make sure that there's some improvement over existing conditions. And I think you've probably done that with your infiltration as well, but it makes it harder for us when we want to look for more significant permeable surfaces at other locations if we took a pass on, you know, asking you to install this type of material. So Phil, I think we'd be asking that you use those materials. It sounds like it's a small area, wouldn't be much of a premium. So I think we're going to be putting that into the order of conditions.
Yeah, it's fine. No problem at all.
Okay, good. Elena, do we have any hands up from the public? I do see a hand up there.
I see one hand up.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Ray Brump, and I'm the president of Midway Artist Collective, which is the ownership entity of 15 Channel Center Street, which is two buildings down. I know Phil because we both are part of the Channel Center Owners Association, the ownership entity that owns the streets that you've been discussing. I just wanted to flag a few things for your consideration regarding this project. The first is that both our building and 25 Channel Center Street have had significant water infiltration issues in the basement, particularly during construction. This happened during the construction of 9 Channel Center Street, or I should say the renovation of 9 Channel Center Street, which is the building between 7 and 15. So we would really love it for both 15 and 25 to be included in the monitoring for this project, and to understand more deeply the flood prevention methodology and the foundation methodology in terms of trying to prevent water infiltration to particularly the historic buildings. The other component is that, as Phil mentioned, there's a $250,000 commitment to do improvements to the park. That is land that is owned by the Channel Center Owners Association. I think we would be very supportive of improvements that went above and beyond that $250,000 to speak to some of the things the commissioners have raised regarding mitigation, resiliency. I don't know whether $250,000 will get us there. There's a lot of surfaces in the park that could be seen through a more contemporary lens as it relates to impacts. And I think with that, I'll also just raise that it would be great to have a unified approach to the flood prevention methodology. As Phil said, I'm not aware of anything either at the building level or the CCOA level regarding flood deployable barriers within the street or the district. And so if that is an opportunity through this project to help create something that is not just for 7, but more broadly for the buildings on the street, that would be helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think as far as your questions, I think those are discussions to be having with Phil and other owners of the association. What I would say about the flooding, I think I think you're saying that the cause of the flooding was due to inadequate dewatering activities for construction. So Phil, I would expect that you'd be sharing with your neighbor, your construction management plan. Do you have a NIPD's dewatering permit for this?
Not yet. We have not pulled that yet. That
But
will
you
be on the
get
plan.
one.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate that you had that experience because that's why you get a dewatering permit, right? It should take care of that. So I'm not,
And it was,
no
I'm
idea
sorry.
what happened. Go ahead, please.
Well, it also deals with something that Commissioner Sullivan was raising around this concept of back flaps and water coming back up into. There were several events that happened during a high astronomical tide during construction that exacerbated that condition that you're describing because flaps had not closed properly. And, I think as Commissioner Sullivan was characterizing, all these things are working together as a system. And so we would really, really, really want for very, very careful monitoring throughout the construction of the project to make sure that challenging conditions are not further exacerbated by construction that can make some impacts manageable. They suddenly become not manageable during a high astronomical tide and, dewatering situation or something else, because with a 15,000 square feet footprint below grade, significantly below grade in our building, and the entire parking garage in 25 Channel Center Street below grade, and not just, below 21.5, below 21.5. That kind of an error could be devastating for both projects. And, I don't want to speak for 25 Channel Center Street. I'm sure they would not want to pay that bill. I can speak from the founder of an affordable housing collective that purchased the building to stabilize this building for artists in perpetuity. We would not want to deploy our resources for that kind of a challenge. So we would like to be part of the monitoring and have some very, very careful, thoughtful work done to prevent it from happening. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And I share your excuse me. I'm sorry. I share your concern for the district-wide flooding issue. It would be good to see some sort of district-wide cooperation there, Phil, when you talk to your neighbors, because, what's the point of diverting floodwaters from one property onto another? So should be unified. So with that, Elena, is there anyone else who's raised their hand?
I'm not seeing anybody else.
Okay, so Phil, we'll be adding in conditions for the white or the light materials for the roof, maintenance condition for the deployable barrier, and also the what else did we talk about here? Oh, the permeable concrete. So with that, I would entertain a motion to close this hearing, issue the order of conditions for this project with those 3 special conditions.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So that carries 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for a determination of applicability from the Esplanade Association for the proposed installation of a new floating seasonal fountain located in the Dartmouth Lagoon within the Charles River Esplanade, Back Bay, Massachusetts. Resource areas are land under waterways and I guess it's waterways. I haven't seen that one come up very often. BVW bank, 100-foot buffer to bank, 25-foot riverfront area and 25-foot waterfront area, also bordering land subject to flooding. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Hi there, my name is Ali Badrujian. I'm the Director of Projects and Planning at the Esplanade Association. We're the proponent, and we have project partners in attendance, AJ Turigny and Liz Gorda, both from DCR, and also Joe Honorato from Water and Wetland, which is our contractor.
Great. Floor is all yours.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to all of you for hosting this forum. I'm excited to share more with you tonight about our project, which, as Commissioner Parker said, seeks to return a seasonal floating fountain to the Esplanade. This here on our first slide is a drawing of the original 1993 fountain from the DCR archives. Our thanks to DCR for sharing resources from the original project and their guidance as we launch this new project. Next slide, please. We have a brief agenda here where we'll review some site context and historical context, the proposed product, and install plans and the resource areas on site. Next slide, please. Just a brief introduction slide. The Esplanade Association has partnered with DCR for over 23 years to bring free community programs, as well as improvement and maintenance projects to the 64-acre Charles River Esplanade. Next slide, please. On our map slide here, you can see this project is proposed for the middle of the Esplanade's 3 lagoons at the terminus of Dartmouth Street. This is really in the heart of the park, and it's a Zone AE flood zone. Next slide, please. And you can see here the lagoon is at the end of Dartmouth Street. That's the footbridge ramp entrance coming down on the left side of the photo. These granite steps and the balustrade are known as a landing for launching and landing small boats. There are several of these on the Esplanade designed by Arthur Shercliffe in the 1930s to give visitors a more direct connection to the water. Next slide, please. In the center of Dartmouth Landing is a bronze medallion, which you can see here in the photo at the left. This was placed in 1993 to celebrate the centennial of the Metropolitan District Commission, which was later absorbed by DCR for the city's state parks. The centennial was also celebrated with the installation of a 3-columned fountain, which you can see on the medallion. And then this photo in the center is the only photo we've found of the original fountain. So if anyone has any archival photos, we'd love to see them. Even though it's tiny from the air, you can imagine how tall and majestic it was from the ground. That fountain was replaced at some point with something smaller. You can see in the photo at the right, the last known fountain in 2015. Next slide, please. So now to our proposed fountain, we hope to reintroduce one that matches that beautiful original fountain, but hope that it might also bring some ecological benefits, that it won't just be an aesthetic, historic, and cultural benefit, but we've seen that fountains like these can increase oxygenation, reduce some of the harmful effects that a warming climate has on the health and enjoyment of shallow water bodies like the Dartmouth Lagoon. So you can see there our #1 objective, and then to also celebrate DCR and reintroduce this historic entrance point. Next slide, please. We have some photos here taken last week. We all know that Esplanade is man-made, but this granite landing is especially hardscaped. This area is visited by walkers, bikers, kayakers, small craft sailors, and paddleboarders, as well as swans, mallards, herring, and turtles. The lagoon has water lilies and a stand of cattails. That's the bordering vegetated wetland that we had in our RDA. And at one end of the balustrade here circled in red, the electrical infrastructure remains, which powered the past fountains. And we've found it to be in good working condition for the proposed new fountain. Next slide, please. Here we have a few photos of that existing electrical infrastructure. You can see an electrical cabinet, which holds the fountain control panel. There's a PVC conduit, which goes under the bank, and that helps connect the fountain's 2 electrical cords into that electrical cabinet. You can also see a detail of the cattail area on site, which we estimate to be about 4 or 5 feet wide. Next slide, please. Here we have a photo and drawings of the proposed fountain product. It stands at 4 feet 8 inches tall. It has wheels on the bottom to facilitate installation, but once it's in the water, it floats because of those blue blocks, which are float blocks. The fountain is proposed to operate seasonally from dawn to dusk, May to October. It comes with a wind module at the electrical cabinet, which automatically turns off the fountain in high winds, as well as LED lights, which would only be on for occasional evening events permitted by DCR. Generally, with these sorts of fountains, when they're removed for the season, they cap the cords and put small pull buoys on them and on the mooring lines as well, so that they can easily reattach the fountain in the spring, but we can have everything removed if that would be preferred. So if the project is approved, the contractor and the electrician will be on call throughout the season for maintenance under a DCR access permit. Next slide, please. Here we have our installation plan. Sorry, it's a little hard to see, but this is the original MDC 1993 plan, which we're following. You can see here that the fountain is off-center. This allows for people using the canoeway to have a straight shot through the lagoon. And to install the fountain, we would propose to lay plywood or planks down on the granite steps of the landing to guide the fountain into the water by hand. No heavy machinery is required for install, and an installation specialist in a small boat would finalize the placement of the fountain in the lagoon according to the plan here. Next slide, please. We included these elevations for context. These are also from the MDC original 1993 plans, and you can see the fountain represented in the bottom elevation. The fountain has adjustable nozzles, so we could make the columns less tall or less wide to reduce the area of the fountain spray if needed. Next slide, please. And here we can see the wetland resources identified on site. We included that bordering vegetated wetland since we've observed cattails on site, even though the area is not intended to have a wetland character. The fountain has 2 electrical cords. One is a 6-gauge cord and one is a 12-gauge cord, and those would lay on the land under the waterway and then pass through that 4 or 5 feet of cattail area on their way into the PVC conduit, and then they would go under the bank in the conduit to enter the existing electrical cabinet. The fountain has 3 proposed mooring lines, which you can see in red. Those would be nylon ropes, each attached to a regular 8-inch cinder block. And so those cinder blocks and the 2 electrical cords are the only things that would be on that land under the waterway during the 5-month operating period. We've confirmed with the contractor, and we've also discussed with the DCR ecology team that the fountain would not impact the water lilies or the cattails, and it's unlikely to curb visitation to the lagoon by wetland wildlife. Next slide, please. These last 2 slides list the wetland resources and the impacts that the proposed project might have on each. And we've assessed, along with some project advisors at Fort Point, that the project would not affect the ability of these wetland resources to perform their important functions, and there will be no loss of area to the bordering vegetated wetland comprised of the cattail stand. And so we ask for the commission to please consider a negative determination. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ellie. Oh,
Oh,
you don't
this
want
is
to go
just a
through this,
slide.
right? We know all this information here. Okay. Okay, great. Looks good. Question for you as far as the water quality itself. Are you going to be, besides visibly monitoring the water, which I assume you'll be able to tell if there's more or less algae blooms, any other sort of monitoring that your DCR is going to be doing?
Yes, we've just started a proposal to do some water quality testing that might include dissolved oxygen, temperature, E. coli, and identifying the algae in the lagoon. So we would look to do some before tests, and then if the fountain project is approved, do some tests later on in the season to compare.
Oh,
That
that'd
would
be great.
A DCR research permit.
Fantastic. If you don't mind sharing that with Elena, that would be fantastic. So we could have it just for our own reference. Okay. That's all I have. Elena, what do you have on this?
I didn't have anything that wasn't already covered in the presentation. And a main note that I think we have is that staff wasn't able to confirm if the existence of cattails there meant that there was definitively bordering vegetated wetlands. So that's still sort of an outstanding question here, but I also don't think that that's a question that's being asked by this filing. I just want to note it for the record.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Now, how deep is the lagoon water?
It's at least 4 feet deep. That's the minimum required depth for the fountain to work. It's probably in the 4 to 6 range. It depends on what the dam is set to.
Yeah. And how high are you going to shoot this fountain? I didn't quite catch that.
That is a good question. Joe, can I ask you to respond to that one?
Yeah, so Joe Honorato with Water and Wetland, we're the contractor for the Esplanade Association. So great question. As Allie mentioned in her presentation, there is wrenches on the nozzle. So it's manual. We would have to set it when we go out there. So we can kind of set the height manually. So again, we got to go out on a boat and do it. It's not like a switch we can flip, but generally speaking, the top tier, because it's kind of the 3 geysers, is about 24 feet. Then I think they're like 22 and 18 or something like that, but we can change that with the wrench. I don't think we can get any higher, but we could get lower. And then also, as Allie mentioned, there's wind control. So that's on the panel. And if it gets too windy, it'll just shut itself down. That way it's not blowing everywhere.
Right, I was just curious. The electrical panel you said is in good shape. I find that about every 20 years, you can't get parts for electrical panel parts. If anything does go wrong in the future, do you know if that is a obsolete system you got in there, the electrical panel, or is it new-ish?
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. That's from the old fountain in 2015. So we would take that one down and replace it with a new panel that matches the new fountain. It would just, the cabinet would remain. It's just the panel inside that can pop off
Yeah.
and have the new one popped on.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you were keeping the old stuff. Just something else to break, that's all. All right, that's all I had.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long?
Nothing for me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
Nothing here either, thanks.
Commissioner Conan?
Looks like an exciting project. I'm looking forward to the fountain, actually. You mentioned oxygenation, Ali. Is that because currently there's an issue?
That's a good question. Not that we've observed through testing, but this year we've seen the return of the herring and some other wonderful species really enjoying the lagoon. And if a little bit more oxygen can help with that, we'd be glad to see it. There have been past years, especially in drought years, where the lagoon looks really low, really mucky, really yucky. And if that were to happen again, we'd hope that a fountain like this could help keep it a habitat that's healthy for herring and turtles and such.
So it's not really an oxygen issue, then it's more like the mucky yuckiness of it that could happen occasionally. Okay. Also, I mean, just to understand this better, it's not a problem being solved, but maybe the quality of life for whatever lives there to be enhanced, and
That's
of course
right.
our own.
Yeah,
Okay.
and our own enjoyment too. Hopefully a little bit less smelly, fewer mosquitoes, things like that.
Any way you plan to measure those improvements?
Certainly the water quality testing that we had mentioned, dissolved O2 temperature, E. coli, and algae ID. I don't know if anyone's up for counting mosquitoes with me, but we could plan on that.
Sure. Yeah. I'll go along. So you mentioned the electrical panel. It's good to know that the old one is going to get replaced. What's the power source for this? Is it like solar or something because it's out in the water?
Oh, so the fountain has two electrical cords which are attached to it, and then those would lay on the bottom of the lagoon until they enter into the PVC conduit, which connects to the electrical box. So those just get plugged into that panel in the box, and then the box itself is connected to either the lighting system or other electrical infrastructure in the park.
So that's already on the grid then.
That's right.
Great. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Elena, anybody from the public?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, and we also haven't received,
Nope.
Nick raised his hand.
Commissioner
Sorry,
Long.
Commissioner Long.
I'm sorry, I didn't think of this at the time, but I was just wondering, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this, but you would plan to turn it off if the Public Health Commission issues like an E. coli or algal bloom warning, correct?
That's a great question. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, we don't want it to be aerating all that stuff, right? So, and I'm sure, yeah, you don't want that either. Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right, thanks. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, nothing from the public. Are there any erosion control measures needed here? I mean, you've got the plywood for the stairway, but I don't think there's anything else, right? There's no other work being done?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to issue a negative determination of applicability.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so that carries 5-0. Okay, thank you, Ally. Good luck.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for a determination of applicability from VHB on behalf of Parcel 3 Owner LLC for the proposed work to conduct 17 exploratory borings and 21 test pits at 232 A Street in South Boston. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage, 25-foot waterfront area, 100-foot buffer to coastal bank. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Hi, Michael. I am Lauren Ferrando with Tishman Spire, representing ownership of this parcel. I'm joined by my colleague Eric Stadelman of Breakthrough Properties, Stephanie Krull of VHB, who will be leading this presentation, and Mike Atwood of Haley Aldrich. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Krull from VHB, and we are requesting a determination of applicability for work within land subject to coastal storm flowage at 232 A Street. Next slide, please. This site is located adjacent to Fort Point Channel in the Fort Point neighborhood. Next slide, please. The site is approximately 2.38 acres, and it is primarily a paved parking lot. There is a small public open space at the west end of the site along the channel. Next slide, please. As you can see, that open space is above the elevation of the 1% annual chance flood event, which is 16.6 BCV. And this image shows the resource areas. It shows the floodplain as well as the 25-foot waterfront area and the 100-foot to coastal bank, which is the top of the seawall. This project will not impact the waterfront area or the buffer to coastal bank. It's just land subject to coastal storm flowage, and it will impact up to 3,168 square feet. Next slide, please. So the project consists of exploratory test pits and borings that will support a redevelopment project that will be before the commission shortly under a separate NOI. This work needs to begin before we can finalize that notice of intent. The test pits will be approximately 10 to 15 feet long by 8 to 10 feet wide by 8 to 10 feet deep. And they will impact about 3,150 square feet of impacts to the existing land subject to coastal storm flowage. The purpose of the test pits is to identify the extents of the I-23 tunnel, I-93 tunnel, which goes underneath the site, and you can kind of see it in the images. It's like a diagonal section where the pink test pit locations are. And we'll also be collecting geotechnical data that will be used in foundation design as well. And then the test borings will be 4 inches in diameter. They'll be between 50 and 100 feet deep. It will impact 18 square feet of LSCSF. And we'll also be looking to use these for geotechnical purposes and to take soil samples for pre-characterization of soils. On this image, the test pit, the borings that are in black and white are historical borings, and those were done prior to the current proponent taking control of the site. So we don't have any information about those. They're just shown on here for geotechnical purposes. You'll also see that there are 3 closed blue circles on the bottom right-hand side. Those are some off-site borings that we'll be conducting for the relocation of the Boston Water and Sewer Commission's sewer drain. That is going to be part of this project. It needs to shift out from underneath the location where the building will be. It's going to be proposed within an easement on the adjacent Gillette site. Next slide, please. So this is just describing the work. We included this information in the filing. Basically, the asphalt will be saw cut and disposed of off-site. A machine excavator will be brought onto the site. They'll excavate the soils, stockpile them adjacent to the test pit during the activity. They will investigate in those test pits, and then the soil will be returned to the pit, compacted and paved to pre-existing conditions. No test pits will be left open overnight. They'll always be backfilled, so there won't be gaping holes in the site overnight. For the borings, there'll be a truck-mounted drill rig Soil samples will be collected, and then the holes will be grouted and filled with remaining drill cuttings. Any of the drill cuttings that don't go back into the hole will be containerized and disposed of off-site. And then the boreholes will be covered with pavement, that should say patch, not path. So existing conditions will be restored at the end of this work. Next slide, please. Again, the test pits will be conducted in a single shift. There'll be on-site spill response materials in case there is a spill of fluids from the equipment. There won't be any refueling within the 100-foot buffer to coastal bank. It will take place within LSCSF, but on paved area if necessary. The temporary soil stockpiles will be contained around the outside by straw wattles or silt socks, and they'll all be on paved surfaces. Anytime that there is work being done near a catch basin, the catch basin will be protected. At the end of each day, the workers will clean the area. And also all equipment and materials will be removed in advance of a projected 1% annual chance flood event. And I'm not sure if there's one more slide. Regulatory requirements. So if this activity were being performed within a riverfront area or a buffer zone, it would be considered a minor activity. It's exploratory borings. It is being conducted in LSCSF. The work complies with the Boston Wetlands Ordinance regulations for previously developed LSCSF. There won't be any permanent changes to the land surface. This work is not subject to the stormwater standards, and it doesn't inhibit any planned flood resilience, adaptation, or mitigation solutions. Next slide. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. You can probably anticipate my question, and I'm seeing Mike Atwood from H&A on the in the screen here. So an LSP will be overseeing the stockpiles because looks like you're doing some environmental in addition to geotech.
That's correct, Commissioner Parker. Yes, they're being done for geotechnical and environmental purposes. So there is an LSP that's on board for the project if it's necessary.
Yeah. Okay, great. So just out of curiosity, you're going down 100 feet. How far down is the tunnel?
Well, the borings that'll be going that deep are not within the footprint of the tunnel.
Okay.
The building is being offset from where the tunnel lies below ground. And so the deeper borings are being drilled for support of the new building.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And how long is the work going to take?
The work's going to be staged. We've presented to you all the borings and test pits at this time so that you understand what the scale and the scope of the work is. But from the perspective of timing and schedule, I think the first phase is scheduled for around June, July, end of June, early July. And then there'll be probably other phases that occur during the course of the rest of 2024.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Eleanor, what do you have?
So the only things that we were wondering about was about the tunnel underneath the site. We know that it runs slightly diagonally in a portion of that. So just to clarify if that was impacting the decision to have a test pit versus a boring, and then also what the plan is for operations of the parking lots that exist there currently during the test pits and the boring process.
Well, I can certainly answer the question about the test pits, the ones that are positioned over the tunnel. The depth to the roof of the tunnel is essentially about 8 to 10 feet. And where many of those test pits are planned is not where future building will be constructed, but there'll be future sort of, I think I like to call it a resiliency park area. So we have to work with MassDOT with respect to understanding where their tunnel is and what we're going to be able to do over the tunnel for the future construction and the building of that park.
That's helpful. Thank you.
On your other question, I'm going to defer to Lauren on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So the surface parking lot currently on the site is, of course, a privately owned parking lot by ourselves, the proponent. It's managed by a third-party parking operator, SP Plus. They manage the adjacent lot as well at Channelside. So we will be working closely with them to make sure that there is no impact to those who are looking to use the parking lot or day-to-day operations. Impact should be limited to a handful of spaces, but we'll make sure that we're managing it accordingly.
Great, thank you both.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, you have 21 test pits. Are they all that very, very large size?
For the most part, John, I would say the ones that are scheduled to be over the tunnel will be in the smaller footprint range. I guess the way we described it to you is we wanted to certainly kind of bookend what the limits could be in both, you know, plan dimension as well as depth, and it's going to be a function of really what we encounter. So we're planning for and preparing for up to 10 feet, but if we can get the information at shallower depths, we would certainly stop.
Yeah, you want to just put them all together, your foundation will be built.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
So, when you open up something that large, I mean, what are you looking for? I mean, obviously you'll see what's at the bottom, you'll see what's at the sides. It just seems like it's so wide and long.
Well, we're looking for the remnant casting basin slurry wall that was used to build the tunnel. We're looking for old seawalls that might be still buried in place and impact the construction of whether it be the new storm drain relocation, for example, or where the building is going to have deep foundation elements. So it's yes, it's large, but in the grand scheme of things, to be able to get 5 to 10 feet down, you have to have something that large at the plant at the grade ground surface to start with. It won't necessarily be that big in footprint as you dig down deeper.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. It seems very large. All right, that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long?
Yeah, thanks again for the presentation. Only thing I might ask is if we could specify silt socks over the straw wattles, only because the silt socks, at least in my experience, are heavier. And you know, we don't expect anything bad to happen, obviously, but they would do a better job of containing sediment or other things than a straw wattle, especially if you can't stake it into the pavement, which is impossible. So that's all I had there.
That shouldn't be a problem, Commissioner Long.
Great, thank you. That's it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
Yeah, I guess my only question was sort of along the lines of Commissioner Sullivan, is that like with these test pits, if you get down to 10-foot depth and you haven't found the roof or, you know, slurry walls or that type of thing, do you then keep digging, or do you then just sort of probe from that and you're close enough? I was just curious, like how, I mean, there's obviously the construction plan drawings that you can probably have on archive or whatever, so you have a rough idea of where it is, but I was just wondering how much plus or minus of that 10 feet we might expect.
Commissioner Wilson, I would say that there probably wouldn't be any intention of going much deeper than the 10 feet at all. You know, where that 10-foot depth probably is driven by, for example, is there are a couple of test pits that are being planned as part of the storm drain relocation. And the records for that storm drain relocation certainly show that the invert of that existing pipe and then the future pipe that's going to have to be replacing it is going to be down at about that 10-foot depth. So we are trying to understand, at least to the depth of the excavation for the trench for the new storm drain, what we might find at that depth.
Okay, all right, yeah, as long as, yeah, it's not sort of like, well, we have this open and actually we need to go a bit deeper now. That sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Parker. How much deeper is the tunnel after you get to the 10 feet?
From the roof of the tunnel to the bottom of the tunnel, it's about 40 feet. So the bottom of the tunnel is about 50 feet below grade.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about I-90, right? Not I-93, just to be clear. We're talking about the Mass Pike.
Correct. I-90 eastbound and westbound,
Right.
as well as some various parallel roadways that are within the tunnel and ramps.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I thought I heard I-93.
You did. That was my mistake.
Okay. Thank you. And the RDA, the scope of the RDA doesn't include the work going on in the neighboring site, does it? I wasn't clear about that, like the Gillette site.
No, it does include that. The 3 test
Yeah.
borings are part of the 17 that were identified.
Ah, okay. So there won't be a separate one for that. You're asking for an negative determination for those as well.
Correct. They're all part of the same 17 that were identified. I think we just didn't put them in the legend by mistake.
Okay. So I think we may want to make sure that that is clear. And I thought I saw that the equipments and the materials will be removed in case of a 1% storm event. What if it is not 1%? What if it's 2% or 3% or 5%? Will they not be removed?
If the commission would prefer there to be more conservatism in when the actual equipment would need to be taken off site for a particular rain event that's predicted or storm event that's predicted, we can certainly accommodate that as well.
It gets kind of tricky because storms aren't generally predicted in that way. They don't say this is going to be so and so event. It's usually only the big storms like Winter Storm Grayson or something that are projected to be the big events that we would know. So if you did request that, we would need to know how we would know that that was what the storm was or the flood event.
How you would know that how would you know that it's a 1% event?
Yeah.
Well, that's usually predicted on on a weather channel. And also you can look at the water level from the NOAA tide gauge, and you can see 3 days in advance if it's going to reach that particular elevation, but we don't necessarily know the elevations of the other flood events.
Okay.
Unless you have guidance on that.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair, and I think it's very deterministic. You know, we can figure out what water levels correspond to those exceedance probability events. I was just trying to understand, you know, how you came up with that, but I think
We came up with that because that's a standard condition that the commission puts on projects within LSCSF. So we just wanted to state ahead of time that we're aware of it and we're agreeing to it.
Okay. But in general, if there's like wind predicted or whatever, you would take that into consideration and take precautionary measures, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you. That's all I had. And thank
Yeah, probably a bunch of swimming pools aren't all that helpful to what you're seeking anyway. So.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Elena, anybody from the public?
I'm not seeing any raised hands, and we also did not receive anything in the inbox.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I would entertain a motion to issue a negative determination of applicability with our standard erosion controls, which would include the use of a silt sock as the primary erosion control measure.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for an amendment to the original order of conditions for DEP file number 0061918 and Boston file number 2023-005 from TRC on behalf of Thompson Island Outward Bound Education Center of Boston for the proposed replacement of timber piles along the seaward facing pier located on Thompson Island. The resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage and land under ocean. Elena, how are we handling this? Do we have a presentation? Yes, it looks like we might have a presentation. Okay. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I assume you can hear me. Payson Whitney from TRC and Alec Hillman from Thompson Island are here.
Great, thank you. Floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so as you noted, we were before the commission back in late 2022. The commission issued an order of conditions in February of 2023 to relocate one steel pile on the side of this pier, and also to replace an existing deteriorating float, which is basically floated in, and then the old float was taken away. That work was done last year to swap out the float. The pile work was not done as that was being planned to float in the new pier. It was determined that there were some piles that were damaged on the seaward face of the pier. And Elena or Didi, if you can maybe go to the third sheet on the plan set there while I'm talking, we can talk about this. But it was determined that these actually go back one, please, to C2. Thank you. They did determine that there were piles on the seaward end of this pile supported pier, which a pier has been in this location since the late 1890s. Chapter 91 license was issued in 1892 for this pier. The piles on the end of the pier are the piles that the vessels will breast up against as they berth at the dock. And the piles are deteriorated to the point that they're damaged, that vessels some vessels are refusing to visit the island at this point. One actually suffered a little bit of damage last year while it was docking as well. So what we're asking the commission for is an amendment to the existing order to allow the 10 piles to be extracted and then replaced in their position at the seaward end of the pier. The methods that we discussed in detail a year or so ago would be the same, and the resource areas are obviously the same, as this is a maintenance of an existing pile held structure. We did reach out to Mass Division of Marine Fisheries about the time of year restriction. Typically, pile driving is not allowed during the summer in Boston Harbor, but Mass DMF in this instance did not exert those time of year restrictions, and a copy of that email was sent to Elena and Didi as well. So you should have that in the file. Alec, I don't know if you have anything you want to add just operationally about the pier and the need to replace these piles.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it well, but so our vessel docks on a floating dock. We can see sort of inboard there, but the face pier is for larger vessels, for charter events and things. And it's just it's been a long time since any new pilings have been driven, and it's a in-kind replacement repair. So we're not doing anything different, new, just revamping what's been there previously.
Right, and these piles were not in the state that they're in now when we were before you for the float project as well. They really suffered some damage during some storms in 2023, and then also obviously they've been just sitting there and getting worse since then. So that's why we're before you tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I don't really have any questions on this. Eleanor, what do you have?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, just looking at my notes, wanted to clarify how the piles are going to be disposed of once they're extracted.
Yeah, the contractor would take them to be properly disposed of. They'd be put on their work barge, and they would be taken to their facility, and then they would dispose of them properly.
Perfect. And how long, sorry, did you say that all of this would be happening over the course of a day? I'm just thinking of making sure that the extracted piles are properly covered in case of any rough weather.
I think they would plan on doing marine work. You plan to do work when you're not going to have rough weather out
Fair.
there for something like this. So, and I would imagine just, marine work takes a little bit longer than land-based work. So this could take a few days to get done. Maybe 1 to 3 days would be my guess. But certainly within the span of a week, it would get done. And like I said, the contractor would look at the weather windows, and do it in the summer. You have longer weather windows of good weather as well. So
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Eleanor. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, not to the point of the piles. Does that pier have a dry standpipe for the Boston Fire? Oh,
It does. It does.
and will that be impacted at all by doing this?
No, it will not. So if you look at it's not the best view of the pier, but the standpipe goes all the way down And then it's on the inshore side, so the pilings they're touching are not affected at all. And I actually had the fire department come out last fall and test the standpipe all the way up to the highest elevation on the island, and it works very well, which is great. But no, the piling work doesn't affect the standpipe for BFD at all.
Yep, okay, no more questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Long?
Nothing for me. Keep up the good work out there.
Great. Commissioner Wilson?
None here either, thank you.
Commissioner Conan?
Yeah, yes, I also appreciate the good work and the spirit of the project. No questions from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Eleanor, anybody from the public?
I'm seeing no raised hands and we didn't have anything in the inbox either.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I would entertain a motion to issue an extension, 3-year extension for the order of conditions for, sorry, DEP file number 0061918 and Boston file number 2023-005.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan, and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for an extension for DEP file number 0061789 from Ty and Bond on behalf of NSTAR Electric Company, DBA Eversource Energy, for the proposed installation of a new underground electrical transmission line located on O'Callahan Way, Columbia Road, Morrissey Boulevard, Old Colony Terrace, Playstead Road, and Springdale Street in South Boston. Resource areas: land subject to coastal storm flowage, waterfront area, 100-foot buffer to coastal bank, and 100-foot buffer to coastal beach. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
This is Chris Newhall with Eversource Energy, and I have with me tonight Tracy Adamski with Ty and Bond.
Great. Floor is yours.
So we previously received an order of conditions for this electric transmission line project, and we are up against our 3-year expiration date, and we're seeking an extension so that we can continue to install the line. Construction's been ongoing for the last couple of years, and we're probably about 50 to 60% done with the line. And seeking an additional 3-year term so that we can complete the work.
Okay, no changes?
No, well, there's been a couple changes that we've sought for you folks previously. I believe 1 or 2 minor changes that we got approval for. We do have another minor change pending before the commission, I believe on the June 26th hearing. We've yet to hear back on an administrative completeness for that request for an amended order of conditions. But I believe currently we are we'll have an expiration, I guess, that is probably between now and that time. So we're seeking the extension so that we can have a valid order.
Okay, thank you. Elena, do you have anything on this?
I don't have anything on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
No questions.
Commissioner Long?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Wilson?
None here either, thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Conan?
Any reason only half the work got done in the period, in the time that you have so far?
So, I think part of the reason is that, initially we have to wait for an energy facility siting board approval before any work can begin. We often get our permits in advance of that energy facility siting board approval. So there's a delay on kind of the front end as a result of that. But then any underground utility line work in Boston is notorious for taking longer than anticipated. There's a number of different Reasons for that, it's unanticipated below ground obstructions that you need to work around. There's police details that need to be worked out that sometimes cannot be worked out. So construction crews can't make the planned progress. So there's kind of a laundry list, but those are primary reasons why it just takes longer than anticipated. We always start these projects with rose-colored glasses, but then reality quickly sets in, and these delays, typically require longer than a 3-year construction period.
So now with the reality colored glasses, how much longer do you expect?
So we expect at least another year. We don't expect 2 years, but we do expect at least certainly through the end of this construction season. There will be probably some areas that we may be able to do some additional work in the off season, but once the winter moratorium rolls around, we can't be working in public roads. All work really has to cease until the following spring. So we do expect the construction period to extend into the 2025 season. It may go longer than that, but at least this year and next year is what we anticipate at this time.
1 to 2 years.
Correct.
Right. Thank you. That's all, Chair Parker.
Okay, thank you. Elena, anybody from the public raise their hand?
I'm not seeing any hands and nothing in the inbox either.
Okay, thank you. So with that said, I would actually, before we do that, I just want to make a quick correction, if you don't mind. I got ahead of myself. Last vote I called for was apparently a request for an extension to the original order of conditions for DEP file number 0061918 and Boston file number 2023-005. Dee Dee, could you correct that in the minutes as a scrivener's error?
Yes, I would be able to correct that. And it's for an amendment, correct?
Correct.
Not an extension?
Yeah, I think I said extension. I was a little ahead of myself there.
Okay, no worries, I can do that.
So if you pick that up on the tape, if you could just change it. Okay, with that, I'd entertain a motion to extend the order of conditions for DEP file number 0061789 for a term of 3 years.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
And I vote aye, that carries 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a request for an extension for DEP file number 0061792 from the Department of Conservation and Recreation for the proposed street repaving and sidewalk repairs on Morrissey Boulevard in Dorchester. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage, 100-foot salt marsh area, and 100-foot buffer to salt marsh area. I don't think that's right. So as far as the resource areas here, Eleanor, if you can help me out, we've got land subject to coastal storm flowage. I think it's just salt marsh area and then 100-foot buffer to salt marsh.
Sorry, pulling it up right now, Chair Parker.
I'm not sure I've seen 100-foot salt marsh area before.
That is, yeah, that's funny. I think that is actually
It's
an
gonna be a
error that
typo,
was
right?
carried over from the,
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
original order.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure there was not a new resource area that is
No.
implicated. Okay, thank you. Okay, who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Hi, my name is Catherine Lampiazzi. I am from DCR Engineering. I also have on the call my colleague Liz Gorda from DCR as well.
Great, floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you. So yes, this is a request for an extension for an order of conditions for resurfacing and sidewalk improvements on Morrissey Boulevard between Mount Vernon Street and Freeport Street intersection. I actually have one slide to kind of show progress that we're making, where we're working right now. So in the red is areas that we've completed. So that is between Mount Vernon Street and Ben Cooley Boulevard. And then the Freeport Street intersection, and then yellow is work that we're working on this spring. We're trying to get complete progress towards this work. And the blue is work from Van Coulee Boulevard connecting back to Freeport Street that is proposed for future fiscal years that we hope to get done as soon as possible. And we are requesting an extension.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything on this. Elena, do you have anything?
I don't have anything on this either. We're good administratively, but that's the only note.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Sorry,
Administratively?
we're all set on this one administratively. Everything
Okay.
on time. Yep.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate that. Commissioner Sullivan,
No questions.
Commissioner Long,
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilson.
None here, I think.
Okay, Commissioner Conan.
Just looking to get a little bit of detail on how much of the work is complete, like I was doing with the last one, and how much is left.
You're just looking for, I'm sorry, I was hard to hear you, more information on work that is left?
Right.
Okay, yep. The work that is primarily left is from Van Coulee Boulevard down to the Freeport Street intersection. That includes resurfacing and sidewalk improvement. So that is replacement of sidewalk and improving ADA compliance in that area.
So it roughly looks like, half the work, but depending on the nature of the work, it may be more than half. So I was just trying to get a sense of that.
Yeah, the Freeport Street intersection was kind of a complex work that took probably longer than anticipated, just because we did a lot of improvements with the ADA compliance, crosswalks that cross over the intersection, changing phasing for, electrical panels, and really trying to pay a lot of attention to that intersection. So I think that kind of took a little longer than we anticipated, but we do anticipate to have work done within the next 6 to 12 months.
I see. Thank you. That's all separate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, Elena, anybody from the public?
I'm not seeing any hands, and we also did not receive anything in the inbox.
Okay, so with that, I'd entertain a motion for an extension for DEP file number 006-1792 for a term of 3 years.
So moved.
With a second.
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 Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a request for an extension for DEP file number 006-1784 from Niche Engineering on behalf of Beacon Capital Partners for the proposed construction of a new lab and office building located at 2 Harbor Street in South Boston. The resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage. I just realized looking through this, I am going to need to recuse myself. I know that our firm does work for Beacon Capital Partners, not in relation to this project. So to be on the safe side, I will be recusing myself. I usually go down in order of seniority. I know that Commissioner Sullivan will not be accepting this assignment. Also, Commissioner Wilson, with your permission, I was hoping to be able to skip to Commissioner Long. I don't know if you've heard, he's going to be leaving us in about a month or so here. So this is my way of announcing that to the commission and putting him on the spot. Would you mind if I jumped over you there? Sounds like no. So with that, I would entertain a motion to appoint Commissioner Long chair for this hearing.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Long?
Aye.
Commissioner Conan?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you.
Okay, so right here, we're looking at a request for an extension for DEP file number 006-1784 from Niche Engineering on behalf of Beacon Capital Partners for the proposed construction of a new lab and office building located at 2 Harbor Street, South Boston. Resource area land is subject to coastal storm flowage. Who is here on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you. My name is Chris Hodney. I'm with Niche Engineering. I'm also joined by Mike Loring with Beacon Capital Partners. And we're here to ask for a 3-year extension for the order of conditions for 2 Harbor Street. The order of conditions was issued June 16th, 2021. And construction isn't complete on the project yet. If you go to the next slide, please. So the work that is still ongoing on site includes the park, which is shown in the foreground here at the intersection of, that's the Hall Road on the right and Northern Ave, kind of going diagonally up to the left. It's currently under construction, but not complete. If you go to the next slide. Just another view of that, you can see those trees. And if you go to the next slide. Also the parking lot in the rear, which is basically at the center of the frame here. Also is still under construction, and so that's part of this extension request. Next slide, please. So this shows the originally approved plans. So we're essentially asking for the request so that we can have time to complete building the project site out. If you go to the next slide, you'll see there's also a phase 2, which would be a building which would go on the parking lot, which is planned left here. You can kind of see it bubbled there. So we're kind of at this crossroads here. We're building pieces of the site that are currently under construction. We're kind of slowing down on some of these other pieces of the site that we know would potentially become building 2 in the future. So part of this extension is just giving us time to do that, understanding that we would come back to the commission with either an amendment or another notice of intent for that future work. We just don't want to have to replicate that work again by building something and then having to rebuild it when building 2 happens. Next slide, please. And understanding if building 2 were to not go through, we would end up building the build out of the approved plans, and this is just a rendering of that. And that's my presentation. I'll open it up to questions.
I think, Chris, just to provide just a little color to, the master plan for the Marine Park here is always contemplated 2 different buildings. So the first building's completed. Obviously, as Chris said, site work is ongoing outside the site while we actually are involved or it started the entitlement process for that second building. So depending on how that goes and the timing of that, and quite frankly, also based on the market, we're just asking for an extension to understand what the likelihood of that second building is within the time frame and be able to finish the rest of that site work if it just is deemed that the second building isn't feasible at this time. If that adds any color and makes any sense.
Thank you both. I have no questions. Elena, do you have anything on this?
I don't have anything on this either. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go through the roll of commissioners. Commissioner Sullivan, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Wilson?
None here, thanks.
Commissioner Conan?
Thank you, Chair Long. Just some clarification questions. So is it just the open space portion of the work that's not complete?
That's correct.
Yes.
On both sides of the building, sounds like, right?
Yep.
Okay. And can you just, I know you both did this, but I still didn't quite understand. What does building 2 have to do with this?
Right now, the plan potentially for building 2 is a similar life science building to building 1, both functionally and architecturally. So, like I said, we're at the beginning of that entitlement process, which as we go through it, I'm sure things could be modified, but the plan is in total for the campus to be a life science campus for both buildings to communicate to each other.
Mm-hmm. And you said, I think maybe I heard you, Chris, say that you anticipate coming back for an amendment?
Well, so building 2 goes through, it'll obviously change the condition of the site, right? So it would take the place of the parking lot, which is currently shown behind building 1. So we would anticipate that there would be another filing for that building in the future, when and if it happens.
Okay. Right. Thank you. That's all, Chair Long.
Okay, and I have no questions, so I would entertain a motion to approve this request for an extension for 3 years for DEP file number 0061784.
And Chair Long, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I also just wanted to note that there are no hands up and that we didn't receive any emails about this.
Thank you, Elena. Do I have
So
that
moved.
motion? Any second?
Sorry, second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Mike, just remember, it's not. Yeah, aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully I didn't miss anything.
Thank you. That's my payback for you leaving us.
Granted,
Don't do
yeah.
it again. Yeah.
Well done, well done.
Great. Okay, there have been a number of continuances. First item that I'm going to read out for continuances was initially filed in March of 2020 and has been continued now past the time allowed by the regulations, so this filing will not appear on future hearing agendas under this DEP file number. We anticipate that there will be a new filing in the future, and that is for notice of intent for DEP file number 0061704 and Boston file number 2020-007. Also continued notice of intent for DEP file number 0061772 and Boston file number 2021-010. Notice of intent for DEP file number 0061961 and Boston file number 2023-051. Notice of intent for DEP file number 0061987 and Boston file number 2024-012. DEP file number 0061991 and Boston file number 2024-016 and DEP file number 0061990 and Boston file number 2024-015. We will now begin our regular meeting. The first item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061774 for the demolition of a residential building and construction of a new multifamily residential building located at 839 Saratoga Street in East Boston. Eleanor, what do we have on this?
So similar to past updates, we have not received any new materials from this applicant, so we would recommend holding off on the vote for now.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next item is administrative updates.
We wanted to update the commission on one item. It is regarding an enforcement order, which we had brought to you a while back at 201 to 259 Independence Drive. Staff conducted a site visit this morning, and we were able to meet with a team from the development company and other folks who are involved in that work, as well as one of the landscape architects who actually filed the RDA that was issued for this property. We are on the same page about the facts. They are not contesting the fact that the vegetation was cleared in this area. They've gone through and confirmed the survey, which shows that, to the best of our understanding, no work was done on the abutting property, which is DCR property, so that's good news. However, they've redone the flags for the wetland delineation, and it does look like a portion of the parking lot, which is up further, there might be a small sliver of the parking lot that is also within the buffer, which was not permitted. We're in agreement that a lot of vegetation was cleared that should not have been cleared, all within the buffer. And then another thing that we noted while we were on the site visit is that the straw bales, which had been installed, had recently been replaced, and the old straw bales were disposed of by being dumped directly into the wetland, which is right next to it, not into the buffer, into the wetland itself, into BVW. So we are actually, Commissioner Long, probably going to be either asking you now or reaching out to you to see what you and the rest of the Urban Wilds team think as far as mitigation on that front, because we don't know if it would do more harm to try to remove all of this straw. It's not spread out, it's quite concentrated. I mean, it's like all sort of in one place, and it kind of, like, you can tell they used to be straw bales. And then the other question I have for the commission more generally is just on their thoughts for the what we want to see as far as the timeline goes, what we want to see from mitigation here. Our recommendation would be that we would want to see at least 2 trees planted for each tree that was removed. We're figuring out how we want to find that estimate. We're probably going to be using a few different aerials, and we've requested any construction logs that they might have that might indicate when this happened, and try to get a good sense of how many trees were actually removed here. We'd like to see the area where these trees were removed, like the area that was cleared. We'd like to see that area restored, and then if at some point during this restoration process it seems as though, you know, maybe planting that many trees in this area isn't going to be good for the trees themselves, isn't going to allow for them to grow in the way that they're supposed to, then maybe exploring other locations. But for now, we think that the best course of action would be to try to restore this area to its prior glory, especially considering the fact that there is BBW right there, and that currently the BBW is relatively unprotected because its buffer is completely cleared and is a lot of gravel at the moment.
Okay.
So my ask of you, sorry, our ask is for any of your recommendations, any of your feedback on this, anything that you would like to see out of a restoration plan.
Yep, I think that makes perfect sense. Commissioner Sullivan, any comments?
Yeah, are there any special type of trees that are needed in that area?
We don't know, but that's something we can certainly find out.
Yeah, and my other concern was just what you said, the 2-for-1, if all of a sudden you make a little forest that can't sustain itself.
Right.
Because you overcrowd it.
Exactly. So that's something that we'd want to make it clear that we want more than just a 1-to-1 replacement, but where those trees go might be a little bit more flexible until we know whether that would be doable in that area.
Right. All right. That's all I had. Sir.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Commissioner Long.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for all the additional information and for all your feet on the ground during the site visits, Elena and staff. I think in addition to the trees, I'm assuming there was some kind of, you know, ground cover or shrub layer that may have been destroyed in the process. Not being familiar with the area as much, but a restoration plan that includes, you know, like understory shrubs and an herbaceous layer or seeding or plug plantings or any whatever the landscape architect and wetland scientist think would work. I think that that's all fair to ask for and would result in a more successful restoration. But that's all I got for now. Happy to help with the straw bales.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's something that we can maybe touch base on offline.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Wilson.
Nothing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Conan.
Thank you, Chair Parker. I like the 2-for-1 idea. I think something significant is a warranted response here, but the extra trees don't have to go in the same location as everyone has already said here, but they could go in parts of the city where we have good data on tree canopy, and they could go elsewhere where we are low on canopy. That's a thought. And I think that, you know, we're always planting like little saplings. What about moving trees from where they are not wanted, or we have grown trees elsewhere to here, and that is feasible to move larger and slightly more mature trees. That's another idea. And I like Commissioner Long's idea on paying attention to the ground cover along the lines of the shrubbery, perhaps like a combination planting of a meadow that would be more welcoming to pollinators and in general healthier than grass would also be something to look at. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. On the idea of planting trees in other areas, we've discussed that before. We also discussed, well, this is probably 3 or 4 years ago. It'd be in our files somewhere, but we also discussed the notion of contributions to plant trees in other areas that may need it. At that point, I think we were suggesting a nonprofit speak for the trees But what I was told was that the city, that was problematic from legal department's point of view, number one. Number two is I was told that the city was going to be having that sort of infrastructure put into the environment department. I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's there or not at this point, but it's something to think about, Eleanor, if you could look into that a little bit, or someone, because that would definitely be an idea.
To clarify, the infrastructure to collect funds and
Yeah, to collect fees, yeah,
Right, and
to,
allocate them
they'd have to have
appropriately.
like accounting, and they'd be able to accept it, and yeah, it gets a little complicated when money comes from the private into the public sector.
We can look into that. And would the preference there then be that we start by trying to have a 2-to-1 replacement, and then if that's not the case, then we can explore the option of funds?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And Commissioner Long, thank you. Boston Tree Alliance, that's what I was searching for. I believe that's what was getting started at the time we had first had this discussion. Okay, good. Thank you, Eleanor. Okay. Next item on the agenda is acceptance of orders of conditions, and we have great news. Do you want to announce it, Eleanor? I think that you and Alice and Dee Dee have put so much work into this. You might want to say something about this.
I'm happy to, yes.
Fantastic.
So we have been working alongside other Environment Department leadership and leadership from DCR to come to an agreement for some conditions. As you probably all recall, there were a few standard conditions that tended to be problematic, either on paper or in practice, because of the way that DCR maintains their properties. And so we worked with them and have come to an agreement on some slight reworks of certain conditions where we knew that the problem sort of kept cropping up. And we've come to an agreement on the standard set of conditions for DCR projects. Of course, we'll tailor them to the project the same way we do with any other conditions that we want to apply. But we've come to that agreement, and that means that 2 of the projects that have been on our agenda for quite some time waiting for a vote on their orders of condition are ready.
Fantastic. Great job. Thank you. And thank you for everybody who put effort into this. This has been a long slog. I will note that we have letters of support for the Edgewater Trail in our files from Councilor Pepin and Representative Fluker Oakley. And I think that's it. I think we're ready to finally take a vote on this. I don't know how to do it because we've been skipping over it for so long, but
Can I ask what the changes were?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did we cave or did they cave?
Thankfully, I don't think anybody caved. I think just a question of what, for example, like one of the changes was in the snow management plan. So rather than specifying a specific snow management plan, we reworked it so that the snow management on site that is owned and maintained by DCR is done in accordance with the way that DCR does snow management on their properties and things like that, just to make sure that they accurately reflect the way that DCR would be maintaining the properties otherwise. And I'm happy to share out the sort of full set of conditions, the full 18 pages, which have highlighted in blue the updated versions of those conditions after the hearing.
Yeah, I'd just be interested. I mean, I've never seen a group complain about everything. I just can't wait to the next complaint. That's all.
Commissioner Sullivan, if I could add on to that, first of all, I would say that if anyone caved, it would have been DCR under the withering resilience staff, number one. But number two, honestly, what I reviewed and what I saw was so marginal that it was actually a little amazing to me that it was a point of contention with DCR, and I don't want to speak badly of our partners, but I think there was some sort of hang up there that, and I'll freely admit, probably came from the legal department, and what it looked to me like was at the end of the day, we basically agreed on the orders of conditions that were initially proposed with very little nibbling around the edges.
I'm not complaining. We have to move on because we got all the the riverfront will change, climate will change. We'll have a canyon there, and yeah,
exactly.
I was more curious, that's all.
Yeah, no, it's been a long saga. So with that, I'd accept or entertain a motion to issue the order of conditions for notice of intent for DEP file number 0061958 and Boston file number 2023-048 and DEP file number 0061928 and Boston file number 2023-018.
So moved.
Dave Dukenyan, so moved.
Fantastic. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye, well done.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Sullivan, I appreciate your restraint when I made the lawyer joke and didn't pile on.
Oh, come on, it wasn't that bad, you know.
Okay.
That's how that works.
Okay, last item on the agenda is acceptance of meeting minutes from May 15th, 2024. I did look at them and thank you, Dee Dee, for making us all look like we know what we're talking about.
Oh, and Chair Tucker,
yes.
apologies. I just wanted to clarify, was that motion for, I may have just missed it, for both orders of conditions or just?
Yes,
one?
I
Both, great.
decided both of them out. Yep.
Perfect, thank you, great.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes from May 15th, 2024.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Sullivan.
My eye is conditioned on knowing where Nick's going when we get through with this vote.
Okay. Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Conan,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Okay, Commissioner Long, do you want to spring the news? I actually thought it had been populated, so I apologize if I broke a news bulletin.
No,
here.
that's okay. I am carving out time in my life for part-time grad school. And it's not a goodbye, it's a see you later. So we shall see. But yeah, thank you for, being a great commission to work with. I've learned a lot from each and every one of you. But I'll still be with the city, still with Urban Wilds. Maybe you'll see a comment letter a year later from me. We'll see.
That's great. That's great. And for the rest of the commissioners, Commissioner Long has given me some dates of availability that perhaps we can have a send-off lunch for him at our favorite haunt near City Hall in the next few weeks or in the next month. And I'll send those around. So with that, I would entertain a motion by acclamation to adjourn. Can we adjourn? Any objections? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you for your participation. An exclamation.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Commissioner Long.
Congrats, Nick.
And
Okay, take care.
Thank
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.